So what do you do when life cracks your heart open? When you find out that someone that you love is going to suffer and you're going to lose them and you feel helpless because there's nothing you can do about it but learn to grieve and accept the fact that everyone we love we will eventually lose. Yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow. My name is Ed Hegan. I'm a former New York City firefighter and a mindfulness, meditation, and breathwork guide. And I've experienced tragic loss at work, but I've also experienced tragic loss in my personal life, and a little bit of both. My mom recently passed away earlier this year after a long bout with Alzheimer's and dementia. And just several weeks later, a good friend of mine, a firefighter buddy, who was suffering with ALS for years, he passed away also. And I'm still carrying residual grief from both of their losses. And so I come up here into the woods and I make these videos and I share my experiences because I feel like it's important to have these conversations. I feel like it's really important that we exemplify and embody and give each other permission to be full human beings and experience all the emotions that make us humans. And sadness and grief and loss and mourning and pain and fear, all these feelings are just real human experiences. They're not masculine or feminine or good or bad. They are simply part of what makes us human beings. And it seems like in our modern society, people don't often talk about grief. And I have a couple ideas about why. Because a lot of us came to this country from different countries where we had traditions and customs and rituals and rites of passage where we would come together as a community and grieve the loss of someone that was a member of our family, our tribe, our village. And a lot of us, when we came here, we lost those traditions and customs. And so we have this modern version of, putting them in a casket and going to the funeral home and the church. And those ceremonies can be beautiful, but I do believe that they genuinely lack the depth that is required by the human species and the families of tribes and villages where we come together as a group and really see each other's pain and connect through that sense of loss and grief. And so part of why I make this content is because we don't need other people's permission to teach us how to grieve. We can dare to explore our grief and our pain and our loss. And we can learn and grow and create our own sacred traditions and cultures and then share that wisdom with each other. And we can give each other permission to grieve and process our loss in a healthy way by seeing and hearing and acknowledging each other's pain. And in that way, we feel less alone and isolated with our troubles. And so when my mom got sick several years ago, my family and I decided that we would keep her home, and we took care of her. We changed her diapers and spoon-fed her, and we made her as comfortable as possible, from singing songs and playing guitar to playing old Irish tunes and showing her pictures of people that she loved and knew, and just trying to keep her spirits alive and trying to keep each other's spirits alive too. And there was so much beauty in how we came together as a family and took care of Mom. there was so much kindness and support in the community too. The neighborhood where I grew up in Brooklyn, we would take her out in the wheelchair and she would go up the block into the avenue, into the park, and the people that had known her whole life, neighbors and friends and people that worked on the avenue would wave to her and she would wave back and smile. And in some ways, more joy and lightness came through, even though my mom really wasn't aware of what was going on because of the disease ravaging her brain. In some ways, her spirit came through with even more aliveness because she wasn't caught up in ego or self-consciousness. She was just in the moment. And it was really difficult to watch her light slowly dim. Alzheimer's and dementia is one of those conditions that really, it can be confusing for those grieving that loss. Esther Perel calls it the long goodbye or ambiguous grief, because you're losing the person little by little, but they're still here in body. And so it can really confuse us to think that we shouldn't be grieving because the person's not gone yet, but in some ways their light is slowly dimming. So it can be extra challenging. And so be mindful if you know of somebody who's dealing with a loved one that has Alzheimer's and dementia, that it's a particularly challenging grief because it can be so confusing. And then several weeks later, my buddy who was a firefighter who had come down with ALS several years ago, he passed away. And I also learned so many lessons from being one of the guys that was his primary caretaker. We would do everything, like we took him out skiing a few years ago, and he even came camping a couple of years ago, and we did everything to try to accommodate his needs, get his wheelchair, and make sure that he had all the accommodations he needed to feel supported and loved and be cared for in a basic way. And similarly to the way that my family came together with my mom, the entire, not only the firehouse community, but the entire battalion and division and borough and the entire fire department of the FDNY came together. We held fundraisers to raise awareness about ALS and how it affects veterans and first responders more acutely. And we're working to change legislation to help change laws so that firefighters who come down with these illnesses at a greater rate are protected and their families are protected. Because my buddy Mickey was only 44 years old when he passed, and his children are young. And so I wanted to just make this video, not to publicly bleed online and get attention or use it as an outlet for grief, but it can be that, because it's totally okay to feel sadness. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to make this video, was because it took me a long time to learn to express my sadness. Because I was taught from a very young age that it didn't feel safe to express emotions that made me feel vulnerable. And meditation and breathwork was a huge part of that process. And so I'm going to sit on this log here and invite you to just connect with the present moment. Connect with your body and connect with your breath, and share a few deep breaths with me. And what you can do is, when I ask you to take a belly breath, you can just draw your belly button away from your spine and give yourself a big Buddha belly, which just allows you to breathe using your diaphragm. And in this way, we can relax ourselves and ground ourselves. And we can connect ourselves with the present moment, to ourselves, and to each other. So start by exhaling all the air out of your lungs. Inhale slowly through the nose and fill your belly. Hold, knowing I am safe and at peace. And exhale, releasing all that tension. Inhale slowly through the nose. Fill your belly, accepting the way things are right in this moment. Whole. I am whole and complete. And release any tension you're feeling. Inhale slowly through the nose. Fill your belly. Hold. I can handle any of the challenges life throws at me. And release any stress you've been holding on to. And just continue to breathe deeply into the belly, staying present with yourself. In a world where we're typically looking to avoid feeling heavy feelings and where we oftentimes want to numb and distract ourselves, this is a good opportunity to just allow ourselves to feel what needs to be felt. And this might be new to some people. Some people may just be used to repressing, suppressing, depressing, not expressing, or if we are expressing anger and frustration and rage and passive aggressive. Because when we don't feel the truth of our emotions, if we don't allow ourselves to feel sadness, grief, loss, mourning, fear, guilt, shame, all those things, they will manifest themselves in unhealthy ways, typically as addiction or unhealthy habits. And when we become mindful of that, we become aware that by sitting with our feelings and allowing ourselves to feel the fullness of what we're feeling is really a gift that we give to ourselves. And this allows us to fully feel the loss, the pain, and the grief, and to release it, and to integrate those lessons into our lives. And some people might be afraid of feeling these feelings, thinking, well, if I feel these feelings or if I feel this grief, I'm never going to come out of it. I'm going to get stuck. I'm going to be a hysterical, sobbing mess. That's not true. Actually holding on to it and repressing it is actually creating tension, because what we're doing is we're dealing with like a double wound. First, we have the wound of the mourning and the grief and the sadness. And then the second wound is the tightness and the tension of, oh, I'm not going to let myself feel it. I'm going to man up and be tough. I'm not going to be sad. And then we're just creating this pressure and this tension inside of us because we're simply afraid to feel feelings, because we've been taught and programmed from a very young age that it's not okay to feel those feelings. Well, that is wrong. And I'm telling you that the people that raised you simply didn't have the tools or the skills to teach you how to be emotionally healthy. And so they taught you the way they were taught. And those people taught them to just suck it up, be quiet, and ignore it. And unfortunately, that just breeds disease, illness, frustration, pain, and it actually just exacerbates and makes our suffering worse. So if you're going through a tough time, if you're suffering, if you are mourning and grieving loss, it's so important that we allow ourselves to feel it. And another misnomer is that some people think that if they feel the sadness and feel the grief, that maybe they'll stop loving the person that they lost. Maybe they will no longer feel connected to the person that they love. But that is simply not true. Feeling our feelings doesn't diminish the love and the connection that we have for the people that we love. It can actually enhance it, because try to imagine the person that you love and care about. What would they want for you? I know my mom would want me to be happy. I know my buddy Mickey would be so happy that I was in the woods. He would be making such fun of me, walking around with a selfie stick, recording myself, making videos about crying in the woods because I miss my friend and my mom. And that makes me happy, because he's still, Mickey and my mom, I don't feel like they're gone. I feel like there's such a deep part of me that they could never not be alive, because their spirit is within me. Their love affected who I am, and in that way, I am part of who they are. They are part of me. I am part of them. And that simply just can never die. That is a love and an energy that we simply cannot ignore, that we are affected and changed, and we become the version of ourselves based upon how we interact with all the people we meet. So the more love that we have for someone, the more pain we feel when we miss them, and the more sadness we experience from their loss, the more it is a testament to how much we love them and how special they were and how beautiful they were. So don't be afraid that mourning and grieving will somehow cancel out the existence of your loved one. It won't. It might actually clear some of the heavy emotions out of the way, so you can live with more freedom and joy. And in that way, when we clear out some of the pain, it can actually be a healthy way to honor the memory of the people that we love. And just be mindful that it is a process. It's not a linear process. Yes, there is a process of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, but it's not linear. It can go back and forth. You can go past denial and get into the depression stage and even get into the acceptance stage, but then regress and go back and feel like you're in denial or bargaining again because you're frustrated, because you're missing that person, because maybe that person was there for you during a time you really needed them. And you're reminded of that loss deeply, and you go back into that denial phase or that bargaining phase. But don't make your suffering worse by beating yourself up about still carrying grief and sadness. There's a book that goes that's called "I'm Grieving as Fast as I Can," and it talks a bit about how this is an individual process. It is unique to everybody, and there is no right way to grieve. So this is a beautiful way to honor the truth of who you are as an individual. This is an opportunity to not only honor the loved one who you're missing, but it's an opportunity to connect more deeply with yourself and to understand who you are. And it also is a great practice run for knowing that in our future we're going to deal with loss and uncertainty and fear. And how do we want to handle the challenges in life? Because life is not about hitting this plateau where everything's rainbows and butterflies. As we all know, as we get older, life is about holding this equanimity, which is simply another word for balance. Because we will always have pain and suffering in our lives. We will always experience loss and tragedy. And we will always experience joy and gratitude and good things like health and wellness and adventure and connection and love. And so life is not about getting to this place where you say, oh, I'm going to get rid of all the negativity and I'm only vibing with positivity. That is just simply not realistic. The real life hack is accepting everything as it is. This radical acceptance and surrender of just realizing that there are many things in life we cannot control. And the harder that we try to control those things, the more energy that we waste and the more it can exhaust us. So really the true life hack in some ways is to hold space for both having deep gratitude, joy, contentment, enjoy love, connection, adventure, but also carve out space for yourself to be sad, to miss somebody, to grieve, to cry, to reach out to someone who's going through a tough time and be that person for them. And look, I know most of you guys watching this were probably never taught how to feel your feelings and express your emotions. But that's exactly why I created this channel, was to help spread modern wisdom that can help us in this modern world But a lot of this wisdom comes from ancient practices and from different techniques, because our forefathers and ancestors, they grieved very differently. They grieved as a group, as a community, and as a tribe. And so if we've lost those ancient ways that helped us grieve in a healthy way, well, it's up to us to recreate those sacred rituals and find healthy ways to grieve and honor our pain and our loss. And so I want to simply invite you to consider what it means to know that if you've been carrying pain, if you've experienced loss but never really fully processed it, if you've gone through really difficult things but really don't feel like you have let it go fully, well, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for you to recognize that you are the one you've been waiting for. That as you do this work and as you decide to consciously release and let go of some of the pain that you've been holding on to, that it's a gift you give to yourself. And it can help us to become more strong and resilient and develop the fortitude necessary to handle anything that life throws at us. And in this way, if you've been holding on to your suffering and it's been spilling out over into the rest of your life as unhealthy habits or addictions, or maybe it's compromised your relationships or shut you down emotionally, and your health is suffering mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. If you're noticing that holding on to these heavy, stuck emotions is having a negative impact on your life experience, maybe it's time to let it go, brother. Maybe it's time to recognize that maybe there's a better way. And it doesn't make you less than. It doesn't make you less masculine. It doesn't make you less strong or brave. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite. Some of the bravest and strongest MRFers that I know are the firefighters that went through some of the biggest losses, but they dare to shed tears and be vulnerable and give other men permission to feel their feelings. It is an honor, a sacred honor and duty to carry your brother's casket, to give other men permission to feel their feelings, to know how deeply we love each other, how much we appreciate the people that brought us into this world if we lose a parent. And with the season of life that I'm in now, at almost 50 years old, losing my mom and my buddy and knowing the inevitable loss of other people in my life, it's in our best interest, if we want to live a full life, to have a healthy relationship with the full spectrum of our emotions, sadness and grief included. So if you're out there and you're suffering, you're not alone. We're all going through it. And some people are just at varying degrees of hiding it better than others, or finding ways to pretend or suppress it or repress it. And that might work in the short term, but in the long term, I think it's important that we recognize that there is a better way, and it's up to us to connect, to use this technology. You're watching this video still, you're using this technology to learn about your emotions in a healthy way. And in that way, you become empowered, and you can grow and change, and you can become more resilient and develop the skills and the wisdom necessary to have that inner strength to handle whatever life throws at you. And you don't have to walk this path alone. So if you want some guidance on how to connect with your body, how to release stuck emotions, you can always go into the description and book a free discovery call. And you can visit edwoodstock.com and sign up for any kind of guidance, or reach out to me if you want to talk. And just know that you're not alone. And if you find this information helpful, please share, like, subscribe, or share this video with somebody that you think might benefit from its message. Because if you know there's people out there that are struggling and suffering, they've gone through a loss and they seem stuck, this might be the message they need to hear to remind them that they're not alone, and that the feelings that they feel are real and valid, but they're also healthy feelings. And if they might just dare to become vulnerable and open up and express and feel what needs to be felt, not only do they honor the person that they love, but they get to honor themselves. And I think the person that they love, that they lost, would be really proud of them for doing the inner work necessary to heal. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it gave you some insights. I hope my story of loss and love and grief and mourning is an invitation for you to explore your own heart and to share that process with others, because there's nothing to be ashamed about. If you're going through tough times or you're going through grief, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken and you're not alone. And in this way, healing from these wounds is a great way to practice the self-care necessary that we need to be the best version of ourselves, so that you can become the version of yourself that you needed to guide you when you were going through tough times. And in that way, you can become that version of yourself, live up to your greatest potential, and become that source of strength and guidance for other people. And I truly believe that is our life purpose, to show up for each other and take care of each other. So do that. Let's take care of ourselves and each other.